Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome. We're going to give people we'll give maybe 1 or 2 minutes just in case because it's 3:30 and just want to make sure everyone has a chance to log on. So if you want in the chat, you can just put like your major or the year you're at SMU and then kind of keep the conversation going.
Darlin, is the chat enabled and I'm just missing it?
Oh,
see, Piper's nodding. I'm glad that you were on the same page.
That is so great to know. Let me log in real quick.
So if you want, actually, while we're getting ready, Piper, why don't you tell me what year are you and what's your major?
Hi, yes, my name's Piper and I'm a current junior and I'm double majoring in business management and public policy.
All right. And give me one thing you actually came here to learn. We'll do this with everybody.
Yes, so I'm very interested in international development is actually something I'm really interested in. So I really want to hear just about how to get connected in that area because I've met a few people just from kind of personal connections, but not really through SMU. So I just wanted to hear about kind of how you get started, if you need postgraduate degrees, all of that jazz.
Sounds good. Reese, you're next on my list, darling. Tell me who you are, what you're studying, yada, yada.
To be a resource.
Are there two Reeses? No. Reese Brew.
Yeah, hey there. Can you hear me?
Mhm.
All right, hey guys, I'm Reese. I'm from Dallas. I'm a junior like Piper. I'm studying real estate finance, but I really want to work in the government sector, ideally with like the State Department or the FBI or the CIA or something like that.
You muted yourself.
No, I can hear him.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Okay.
You're good.
You'll be pleased to know that the State Department actually hires a lot of real estate folks. So.
Oh, that's great to hear.
Yeah. All right, Ian, you are next on my list, darling.
All right, perfect. I'm Ian. I'm a sophomore. I have a public policy major with a business minor, and I'm interested in coming to this for the same reason, internship opportunities and future development.
Any particular thing you'd like to be when you grow up? Superhero, Pope, we'll take it all.
I honestly don't know yet, but
Okay.
I'm planning on going to law school, so who knows?
All right. Well, we'll give you some things you can ask yourself. Keely, if you feel comfortable.
Hi, sorry, I'm at work, so I'm going to be a little in and out, but I'm Keely. I'm from Washington, D.C., but obviously I'm here in Dallas. I was born in Texas, and I am triple majoring in political science, international studies, and corporate communication and public affairs. Right now I'm kind of debating getting a job, going to grad school, so I wanted to sort of hear your perspective on all that.
Take a break in between. That's the short version. All right. Niara, was it even close?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So I'm Niara. I'm a double major in political science and anthropology with a minor in law and legal reasoning. I'm looking to go into law school. I think I'm from Jamaica and I'm really interested in international relations concerning like the Caribbean and those things. So I'm very interested to hear what we have to say today.
Great. The other advertisement will be you don't have to go to law school to do IR. We'll talk about that too. Saad, is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I'm a sophomore, born and raised here in Dallas, and I'm a finance major, and I was just looking to see the information given here today and for any internships opportunities, like Ian said. So
awesome. Thing. Okay. And Eric, you are last, but certainly not least here.
Hello, my name is Eric. I go by EJ. I'm double majoring in statistical science, political science, and minoring in public policy, international affairs through our Tower Center. My specific career interests lean towards foreign policy, specifically foreign policy analyst work, whether that's with academia or government or intelligence. I haven't quite figured out yet. And my particular policy interest would be US-Iran relations. I guess I'm here mainly out of curiosity, but the role of grad school and how appropriate that is to any one of these careers is still a large unknown for me. So I'm just interested in hearing what you guys have to offer.
Great. So I can't throw any of this in the chat, but I will make sure that the team at the Tower Center has a whole bunch of links and resources and tools And before I forget, I do want to invite all of you. We're having on Thursday a big online grad school fair with 26 schools from all over the world, and you can come and talk to them and meet them. And then as a complement to that, we're doing these much smaller, like small group conversations around different topics. So Piper, you mentioned international development. On October 5th, we're having a small group conversation with schools about programs in international development. And Eric, tomorrow is our one on national security and global threats. So Eric, if the IC is kind of where you feel called, that may be one to check out. Niara, we're doing one on, we have some regional studies ones, but I don't think we're doing the Caribbean this year. We're doing Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. So not Latin America and the Caribbean this year, but we have lots of schools who have really strong programs in Latin America. We just figured they didn't need any love this particular cycle. So before I forget all of that, there are definitely great ways to have conversations with schools and get to know all of that. So I will make sure the team at SMU has all of those tools and resources. We also have a whole career guide on our site that I will not be able to really unpack for you, but it's got lots of different tips and tools and links and all kinds of stuff. And then we post a ton of job and internships on social media. So like I said, I will make sure that they have all of that since I can't hand it to you directly. You can also see,
Carmen, I was like, our chat is disabled, so I'm gonna figure that out, but I will email everyone everything that Carmen sends over.
And you can see it doesn't actually have my name, which I will fix right now. But APSIA, you can see the acronym there at apsia.org. That's the best email for me. So if there's anything crazy that I say or a question you're not comfortable answering, feel free to follow up by email, and I'm happy to talk a little bit more about all of that. So again, hi, I'm Carmen Mezzera. I'm Executive Director of the Association of Professional Schools of International Affairs. So what is that? We are the community for all of the grad schools around the world that specialize in international affairs, broadly defined. So our schools teach international business and policy and development and peace and conflict resolution and business and law and trade and regional studies and cross-cultural communication and education and all of the huge number of things that are possible in the fields of international affairs. On October 4th, we'll be back to talk about best practices in applying to graduate school. But I know that a number of you had questions about when to go and whether to go and what kind of school to go to. So we'll try to get into some of that too. I'm happy if you want to talk through something, please feel free to raise your hand, or if you have a really specific question, this time is yours. So let's use it as best we can for you. That said, I do want to lay a little bit of a foundation because I realize I've just rattled off like 147 things that are possible in the fields of international affairs. So to sort of set the baseline, because the way our schools approach international affairs and the world is like this, the study of international affairs is interdisciplinary. There's business and economics and trade and language and culture and politics and all of those different things mixed together, which might be a little distinct from the way you're studying political science or the way you're studying international relations. But at our schools on the graduate level, all of those many strands that are woven together in the world come together in the kind of things that our schools teach, because that's also the way the professions work. So many of you may be familiar with diplomacy, and I'm happy to talk about what life at the State Department looks like. But it's important to know that state is only one of the many federal agencies, if you feel called to public service, that do international affairs. You'll see it in the Department of Defense, and many of you may think of defense as a common international affairs area. You'll see it in diplomacy, or excuse me, in development. And many of you may know about USAID, but there's a number of agencies within the federal system that do development. Some like the Millennium Challenge Corporation, Piper, that marry very much the business side of things and the development side of things. Some that maybe have a regional focus. So there's lots of different ways to bring those interests together. Reese, we talked about real estate. Even just looking at the State Department hires sort of classic diplomats. They hire information service people. They hire real estate agents to handle every time they buy a property in another country, every time they move, hundreds of diplomats and thousands of families and all around the world, they need people who manage that side of the house. They hire nurses and doctors and business and finance people. So even just within that one federal agency, there's a huge amount of professional opportunity. But there's a lot of fields outside of defense and diplomacy and development that people may not think of. So science and technology and the way all of those factors interact. Human rights, communication, somebody mentioned corporate communications. There's a ton of demand for cross-culturally competent specialists who understand all of these dynamics and how it's going to influence the way a message is received and how a message is going to be exchanged across borders. It might be through actual technology, social media. There's a ton of our graduates, for example, at a place like Facebook, understanding how communications moves around. You'll also see a number of national security analysts at a place like Facebook. So there's a lot of those different levels and elements, even within one corporation that you may think of primarily as a communications firm. Whether it's, like I said, in science and tech, in education, in all of these different areas, there are aspects for an international career. So as you think about all of those layers, and maybe you're interested in all of these things and trying to figure out, well, okay, how do I know what makes sense for me? There's some questions that I would encourage you to sort of ask yourself and then go through these different layers as you try to figure out your own individual issues. I'm going to let one more person in. And so I guess, where should we start? Let's start, Eric, you had talked about a lot of different things, sort of analysis and US-Iranian relations and intelligence and stats. So I'm going to start with you, if you don't mind being my guinea pig for this. But the questions that I'm going to ask him, I encourage all of you to sort of start with yourself. So Eric, if you don't mind, if you got to pick in your professional life, would you rather spend more time with people or more time with books and information?
Between the two, definitely books and information.
Books and information. Okay. So that's what I've always considered to be a good baseline question, because they're two really different paths. If he had said people, we would be talking, even again, within a space like intelligence, about the kinds of skills and capabilities you need to relate to different kinds of people. But he picked books. So when we talk about books, Eric, are you thinking about actual books? Are you thinking about newspapers? Are you thinking about deep research? So the lesson here, guys, is once you do that sort of high level question, starting to drill down and say, well, what do I really mean by that term? So Eric, when you say books, what do you really mean by books?
Probably, I guess, reports, whether that's newspapers or other mediums of information. I guess I'm not particularly married to books as a medium in particular.
Right. And I knew you didn't necessarily just mean like a bound thing with pages and like attorneyness. But if you talked about reports, you talked about newspapers. So whose reports? Are they US government reports? Are they think tank reports? Are they corporate reports? Whose reports?
I mean, aside from corporate, all of the above, probably think tanks, academic institutions, government reports when possible.
So, okay. So do you want to be on the outside reading these reports or on the inside? So again, here's the next level down and trying to define all those terms as you think about them. So are you a secret insider reading reports before anybody else does? Are you on the outside reading reports after they've been published? What kinds of, again, just to sharpen that a little bit, tell me about whose information this is.
I'm not sure I have a super strong preference. I guess I don't know much about what it would be like to be an insider. So pretty much all of my experience would concern kind of being an outsider.
So that's a really good point. There's a difference between what you've done and what you can see, and then what you aspire to do, right? So if you're like, yeah, man, I may have been sitting on the outside, but really that's where I really want to be on the inside. I really want to be the one cutting the deal for the government as they buy that new property. Or I really want to be the one at the negotiating table making the deal for Facebook as they open a new office in Jamaica or whatever it is. Understanding where you want to be in that chain of events can be one of those really critical things that, again, pushes in one direction or another. So Eric, it sounds like you'd be okay not being the one in the secret room. You'd like to be a little bit farther on the outside, reading the information and then absorbing it. Is that fair?
That would be all right, yes.
Okay. And you mentioned US-Iranian relations. Is all of the information we're talking about in English? Or is this in multiple languages?
I expect it would
In a perfect
have to
world.
be in multiple languages.
Okay.
I am trying to gain proficiency in Persian.
Okay.
And I've just kind of assumed that that would be an asset I would achieve over the next few years.
And if you haven't already, I encourage you to look at things like what's called the Critical Language Scholarship and the Boren Scholarship, both of which invest in students to go gain critical language skills. And they're broadly defined, but these are programs funded by the Department of Defense to build language capability in Americans. And it's like Fulbright, a chance to go somewhere, get enmeshed in a culture and really broaden that command, whether it's Portuguese or what else do they fund? They fund Swahili, they fund Arabic, they fund Chinese, critical languages to the future of the United States. So, okay, that again, we've done this layer, right? Books and people. Well, what do we mean by information, or what do we mean by books? So here you are, you're absorbing all this information from the outside. The next part of this journey is thinking about the work that you want to do and what happens to it. So in development, maybe even if you choose reports and books, it's a question of, well, who reads those reports, or what does anybody do? What do you do, and what does anybody else do with this information that you've put together? So Eric, in your case, you're absorbing all this information. Is it just for your own gratification? Is it to make you sound really cool on Twitter? Like what happens with this information once you've absorbed it in a perfect world?
So this might be a sense where I'd prefer to be an insider, because if my reports or my writings or whatever the product of my research could actually find its way into the hands of the people making decisions, I would love that. I wouldn't necessarily want to be the man making decisions, but I'd love to inform those people.
Okay, so that's another really good instructive point. Do you want to be the person who's deciding? Do you want to be the person who's influencing the person who's deciding? And they're just different branches. And so if you pick, I want to be the person who's deciding, then the time comes to drill down and understand where those levers of power are. So if it is something like, trying to think of what else, some folks, again, talked about communications, right? If it's communications, maybe it is on the corporate level. It's less so on the government level. And so if you want to be the person making decisions, it is more of a corporate trajectory and a corporate path than a government path. In the case of intelligence and information, if the governments primarily are, and I should note, even in intelligence, there's 17 federal intelligence agencies, and then a whole huge number in the intelligence space, the like spies and sort of Jack Ryan-y stuff, intelligence space, that are for-profit companies that most people don't think of, right? They think of the agencies that they make TV shows about, and less so the other ones. So if Eric, you want to create a product that influences decision makers, even if you are not that person, the next step of the journey is, okay, who is it that exerts influence or that shapes their thinking? And so understanding that next level. And if it is intelligence, the answer is, again, those for-profit companies, a lot of think tanks. It might be somewhat universities, but less so. And then it's going to be other government agencies who are trying to influence and shape what maybe an intelligence community does. So your next level in whatever your space is to understand the ecosystem around that decision maker if it isn't you. So if you want to say, I really want to change the way international development is done, and then you say, okay, I definitely want to do more research. And again, I'm just using this as an example. And I really want to do research on, in Eric's case, US-Iranian relations. In the case of development, maybe it's water, or maybe it's girls' education, or maybe it's social enterprise development, or whatever sort of field you've gone down. Okay, and then the decision makers in that space are X and Y and Z. Your next level of research is who shapes what they think about that issue. In the intelligence space, like I said, maybe it's a think tank, maybe it's a company, maybe it's other government agencies. And once you understand that ecosystem, then you can say, okay, what do those people hire for? They hire for statistical ability. So I got to build my statistical ability. They hire for language skills. I got to build my language skills. They hire for networks, right? Oh, I called my buddy and he said race was really cool. I totally have to hire him. Okay, then I have to build my networks. And you can do that level of digging partially through conversations, but partially by reading works and seeing who gets cited, You can do it by going to and watching events and seeing who's on the panel and who's in the audience. So, but it has to start with that knowledge tree. What kinds of things do you want to focus on? Who's working on those issues? Who's making decisions about those issues? Who influences those decision makers? And then what do those influencers actually want from the people that they hire? Does that broadly make sense? Generally-ish,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
So, and what's a blessing and a curse is there's 1,000 pathways, right? I've just mentioned there's 17 of these and 47 of those and whatever. And in some ways that's good because you're not putting all your eggs in one basket. Like if you wanted to be an undersea like mollusk investigator for mollusks that are orange, right? That's a really specific job. But all of the things that you all talked about, finance, comms, international affairs, policy, intelligence, there's a multitude of things under each of those buckets. But to make sure you don't go crazy, you need to channel that energy into things that make sense for the stuff that's actually of interest for you. Okay, so I used Eric as an example, but what are some of the other questions? We talked a little bit about grad school and law school and internships. What is a value? We can talk about finding internships. We can talk about capitalizing on internships. What kinds of questions? I think, Ian, you had been one of the ones who had an internship question. Let's push on you a little bit. What kinds of internship questions do you have?
So basically my kind of preliminary question is, I'm kind of just looking right now as starting as I'm a sophomore, but what would be a beneficial internship to gain with major in public policy as like, I want to hopefully make change in the world with public policy. That's my goal, try to influence others for the better. But I'm kind of, with like so many routes, I'm kind of lost. Like what's a good goal to set for an internship?
Sure. So I'm going to give you two layers of answers to this question. In my opinion, as an old crusty person who's been working for many years, I think there's 5 things that everybody needs, no matter what sector you want to go into. So any internship that will help you build any of these is a good internship.
Okay.
So that's kind of like the 60,000-foot answer. And then I'm going to give you like a 6-foot answer that will be a little bit more about you. But I'm going to need you to think about what you mean by a positive change in the world, because obviously the world's screwed up in lots of ways. And what you mean by the world. Do you mean your town? Do you mean the state? Do you mean the country? Do you mean the world? Like, so we'll get there in a minute. 5 things in Carmen's like everybody needs these rule of thumb. The first one is some experience, some exposure to how an office works, how you behave. Ideally, that experience is either an international one or an intercultural one. And this kind of stuff you can do with your work study. You can do it with internships. You can do it through formal jobs like Keely has. You know, there's lots of ways to understand how to be a functional human being in an office, how to collaborate with others, how to push yourself to do a little bit more, how to relate to a boss and colleagues and coworkers, all of that space. And if you want, we can also talk about how you do this in the middle of a pandemic when it's a little hard to like hang out near the water cooler and do all that kind of thing. So some international, ideally professional experience. The second 2 things is the ability to write well and to speak clearly. You can know everything there is to know about a topic. And that doesn't matter if you can't explain it in a short, concise written form. And I don't mean the 70-page paper your faculty asked you to write. I mean like a page and a half that contains all the information that 70-page paper has, but is actually a page and a half. And the ability to speak comfortably in front of lots of different kinds of audiences. I've had a very weird journey professionally that's truly had me speak to high school students in the morning and heads of state and government in the evening. And the message is the same, but the way you deliver it is really different. But again, if you can know all that there is to know, but if you can't get it out of your mouth, it doesn't serve you or the audience well. So practicing that in class, and maybe you hate this, right? Maybe you really don't like speaking in front of groups. Class time is a really valuable time because it's a safe space to practice this skill. And so even if you hate it, be the one who volunteers to give the class presentation, or be the one who steps up in your internship to brief somebody else about what you're working on. Or maybe they bring all the interns together and they need somebody to give a talk or whatever. Practice it in spaces now because you're going to need it professionally later, in my opinion. The third one is the ability to understand information. And maybe you're a math person like Eric and you're doing your stats and you're doing all the quant thing, and the world needs those people. But even aside from those people, the ability to look at a situation and see, what does it tell you? What is the information? What does it explain to me about what's working and what doesn't work that I am receiving at this particular time? And so you need to understand the math people if you're not the math people, and you need to be able to unpack a situation. And again, what works, what doesn't? How do I fix what isn't working, and how do I grow what is working? So that analytical capability is also a really key skill set. So again, Ian, maybe the organization you're interning with really wants somebody to take anything. How come our website doesn't get more hits? How come the filing system is so screwed up? Why doesn't anybody respond? You know, it can be simple things, but again, that ability to take apart a situation and see the very formal term, the professional term is monitoring, evaluation, and learning, right? I looked at a situation, I evaluated the situation, and then I saw what we could learn from the situation. But it applies to everything in your everyday life. So an internship that would get you that is great. And again, this is a perfect world. Not every internship is going to get you all of these things. But as you look for what they describe an intern does, if you see those terms, you know that it can be a really valuable experience. The fourth one, I think, is what broadly could be called project management. But at the end of the day is really about taking an idea that lives in your head and making it a reality in the world. And again, you can do this on campus with student clubs. Maybe you do this in your faith community. Maybe you do this in an internship. But the ability to marshal the human resources and the financial resources to move an idea along can be really critical. I think somebody mentioned fundraising skills. Oh no, that was Borat. That's who was talking about that. You know, the ability to not just think, but to actually act and do and produce some results in the world. And again, an internship that's going to give you a project to execute could be something that feels very mundane to you, but will give you the ability to testify to the fact that you can do something and not just talk and think about something. And then the fifth one I think that everybody needs is some network around them of people to give them more information, or to give them access to things, or to give them insights that they wouldn't be able to have otherwise. It could be your classmates, it could be your faculty, it could be other SMU alum, it could be people like me. There's a million groups and societies, and some of them are really hyper-focused, and some of them are really broad. Young professionals in foreign policy, right? Dun-da-da, like big tent. Some of them, like I said, it's women of color advancing peace and security and transformation, WCATS. So a much smaller niche, but still a network of people who share those same ideas that you have. And every field has them. These are just the ones that I know best from our space. So finding those people around you, and maybe it's, oh, I saw this internship and so I tipped you off. Maybe it's just putting a good word in. I see that Carmen's hiring, and you know, my friend Keely put her application in. Would you please take a look at it? I have my job, and this is for real, because of the girl who sat in front of me in high school. Her last name started with an H. At that time, my last name started with an I. She happened to be sitting on the hiring committee for APSIA. And she said, hey, in a week, this job is going to come out. You should put your application in for it. So I had a week's head start before the job even dropped to get my materials ready, so I could turn them in as soon as the job opened. And then when it did, she could say to the other committee members, hey, this is somebody we should definitely take a look at. Now, it's not always going to be that much of like a greased wheel, but maybe it is. You're debating between a law school and a policy school. You don't really know what to do. So you have someone else in your network that you can ask, and they'll say, why the hell would you go to law school? You want to take on policy questions. You're not, why would you spend 2 years learning about wills when you don't want anything to do with wills? Or they'll say, oh God, you have to go to law school. Why would you even think about a policy school? Why would you spend 2 years learning about international politics when you want to write wills for a living, whatever it is. So that kind of insider access. So those are the 5 things that I think if you can get them, and again, internships are one way, but there's lots of other ways in your community that you can build those skills. So that was a really long initial answer. The more focused answer, Ian, is I'm going to come back to you. When you say you want to make the world a better place, what of the ways the world is screwed up would you like to put your professional energy into tackling, and what do you mean by the world?
I would love to be able to hopefully affect policy around climate change in a way,
Okay.
and climate control and factory regulation and stuff like that.
So factory regulations, any particular kind of industry?
So I've been toying with the fact of either becoming a lawyer and attacking big company like executives who usually lie about emissions and all that kind of stuff, or something around that kind of area. So I don't exactly know yet.
So you would prefer to be an activist, not a policymaker.
I'm okay with being a policymaker because I think an activist would be kind of harder to do in a way. And I like the policy behind it to help prevent it from the future.
Okay. So even with a question like with factory regulation, it can be beneficial to have internships that are, again, going to help you answer those layers of questions. So maybe what you want to do is go work for the trade association for that industry that you dislike. Okay. Because you need to see, you need more intel on who the decision makers are, what the real levers of power are, you know, who's really connected to whom, so that if you wish down the line, you can dismantle that system if you find that it does not serve the good as you define it. Maybe you want to go work for a law firm and get your feet wet and see, is law, like the practice of law and standing in a courtroom and writing those things, the way you want to exercise this ambition. Maybe you want an internship that's with an activist organization that isn't the lawyers, that lives at the intersection between writing the policy, nagging the companies, and bringing in the lawyers. So maybe there's a nonprofit that's working on these issues. Maybe there's a nonprofit that's trying to use consumer pressure to change factories before you get to the lawsuit. So even before the lawsuit happens, right, there's the secret closed door meeting that says, please don't make us have to sue you, just stop lying, right? And though, you know, understanding who's in that room can happen in the nonprofit sector. So anything that illuminates all of those different layers that we talked about, what their issues really are and how complex they are and which ones are niche and which ones are broader, right? Intelligence down to US-Iranian relations. And then is it government, is it public sector? In your case, factories, did the regulations come through the courts? Do they come through the legislature? Do they come through consumer pressure? Do they come from the companies themselves because they want to avoid all of that whole rigmarole? So anything, and multiple internships, the more you can intern, I think the better. Some of the best internships I had were the ones that I hated. And I thought, sweet God, please never make me do that again. Because I knew that was not, I knew among all those branches, that was not one I wanted to hang my hat on. So in your case, I think, is there a particular industry that you think you'd like to literally tackle?
I don't really know at the moment, but
okay.
I'm just gonna try to get my feet wet.
And even within climate change, right? There's emissions. So thinking about the industries near you or in other places that might be emitting, there, you know, some of the biggest emitters are concrete and buildings. So a place even like the US Green Business, the Green Building Council, that's trying to work with industry to make buildings less of a polluter, since I think buildings are in the top 3. But then the same thing would be the concrete association, the association of lobbyists and trade promoters who work for the concrete companies who are trying to address this issue. So thinking about the different kinds of climate change influencers, and then again, going through all those steps. When I talk about climate change, what I really mean is emissions. When I talk about emissions, what I really mean in my heart is carbon from cars. Okay, then let me go down this route, as opposed to carbon from concrete, as opposed to carbon from factories, as opposed to lead paint in kids' schools. Like, there's lots of different angles, and that's obviously not a climate change issue, but you know what I mean. You know, unpacking all those layers for yourself is kind of one of the best ways to do that. Welcome, Alexa and Samra. I'm sorry I didn't get to welcome you when you came. We're just generally sharing questions that we have or ways that I can hopefully help as folks shape different things. I've been talking a lot, and I know that. So what else can I answer for you? Oh, please, I don't have a chat, so please feel free to raise your hands, and I'm happy to do my best to answer things for you. Reese, please.
So my goal is to be like the Secretary of State. Like Ian, I want to do like good in the world. Like I want to make the world a better place. And I believe like through the massive vehicle of like US foreign policy, that can be one of the best ways to do it. So I have a lot of questions, like how do I become such a lofty position? Like what choices do I need to make? Where do I need to work? What do I need to do?
Sure. So I'll give you my cynical answer last, but I'll give you the rest of my answers first. So the State Department itself and the state, one thing I will commend state is they have a ton of resources, including quizzes about, is the foreign service right for you? They have practice foreign service tests. They have lots of descriptors and information. So normally I would throw a ton of links in the chat at this point, but I will make sure that all of those get to you. So the State Department itself has two components. And this is a bit simplistic, but there's the foreign service and the civil service. The foreign service is a core of people who broadly every 2 to 3 years move to a different country to work at a US embassy or consulate to advocate, to represent the United States and its policies. And I say that very specifically because sometimes I encounter folks who care very deeply about the world, but are not prepared to stand up and say the United States wants this, and to advocate on behalf of the United States, even if you may want to be a little more generally nice about it. So a career in the Foreign Service requires you to pass 2 levels of a test, and then you go onto a roster and you get selected off of that roster and you build your career in one of several what they call cones. So you can work on political issues, you can work on management issues, which I think your background in real estate would lend itself well to, but that is not always a classic path to Secretary of State. You know, economics, political, military issue, all consular affairs, public diplomacy, all of these different tracks. And then you build your career and you move from country to country, working in different roles up the ladder until you can make it into what's called the Senior Executive Service, or be selected to be an ambassador, and then you continue to rise through even those more senior ranks. Tony Blinken, the current Secretary of State, was a careerist, right? He came up through and he did all these things, and that's partially why he was chosen. But partially also why he was chosen was because he was intermixed into the political elements so that a political person, the president, chose him to be the Secretary of State. So if you want to build a career towards that goal, you need to, at the most basic level, pass the 2 layers of tests. State takes a ton of interns, so that may also be a great place to look for an internship. A lot of them are overseas, but some of them are in DC, to just see how the sausage gets made and if you actually like that lifestyle. You need to be ready to live in a different place every couple years. As you think, and I know a lot of you are young, but again, old and crusty, like if you think about family, if you think about getting married someday, all that stuff is going to be shaped by the fact that you're going to live in a different country every 2 years. And whomever you choose to be your partner needs to be on that ride if you choose to go that route. You don't have to. I have lots of friends who are very happily uncoupled, but if that's what you want, that has to be part of the plan. And then you navigate and you work with. Go ahead. Sorry, Donald.
Sorry, you mentioned like there's foreign service and there's civil service.
Yeah.
Is it possible to become like an executive in the department through civil service, or is that only possible with foreign?
Yes, you can certainly rise to the senior ranks through the civil service. However, the Secretary of State, as the nation's top diplomat, 9.5 times out of 10 is going to be selected from the Foreign Service. So if you don't feel called to that mobile lifestyle, the civil service may be a great place for you, but the road to being Sec State is going to be a lot steeper and harder. It just is. The other way, the cynical way to become Secretary of State, is you go invent something or you make just buckets of cash and then you become part of the political machine and then they pick you. That doesn't happen quite as often. I mean, John Kerry was an extremely wealthy senator who served on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and did all that kind of thing. Madeleine Albright was a prominent thinker, right? She wasn't career, she wasn't a cajillionaire. So there are certainly ways to do it, but you know, in any of those cases, you need a lot of international experience, you need a lot of languages, you need a lot of political connections. So if that's the route you want to go, those are the sorts of buckets of skills you're going to need. So if when I said to you, you move every 2 to 3 years and your heart sank, maybe exploring other international affairs careers in the federal system and in public service that would not require that thing, because I could tell your face sort of changed when I said that, might be worth thinking about. Again, there's tons of opportunity distinct from the Foreign Service. So again, that was a really long answer. And I promise, I know we only have 20 minutes, so I'm going to go faster. That's a lie. Piper, please.
Thanks so much.
Okay, so a little bit about me, just to get background on where my question's coming from. Big people person, want to go into international development, subsection conflict resolution, and peace studies is what I'm super interested in. So my question had to do with master's programs. Would you recommend going into something like public policy, but it's at like the Kennedy School? Or is it more beneficial to go into a more specific like conflict resolution, peace studies, counterterrorism, or something like that? In order to, my dream job would be to work at like the World Bank.
Okay. So, I mean, you've mentioned counterterrorism and conflict. I mean, there's a lot going on there. So I should start by saying the name of the program has nothing to do with what the program actually teaches you. You need to look at what the core courses are that you have to take, and you need to take a look at what the electives are that you get to take. If you want to work at the World Bank, you're going to want to study finance. Because it's a bank, you're going to want to study either a region of the world, stats, make friends with Eric and let him, help you guys can trade numbers, whatever, right? So, and the bank is a rough place because again, it's going to be based on a lot of connections, and it's going to be based on the depth of knowledge you have around an issue area. The bank doesn't do conflict resolution. The bank does counterterrorism financing. The bank doesn't do conflict, like stopping warring parties or rebuilding that's not what the bank does. So if it's the bank, that's different than conflict resolution. So if this is where one of the other things that all of you might want to do as you think about graduate school is read about positions that sound really cool, but for which you are fantastically unqualified right now. Maybe it is a senior position at the bank, right? And maybe you then read one at IFC, and then maybe you at the International Finance Corporation, which is part of the bank family, and maybe you read one at the Inter-American Development Bank, which is a cousin. And as you start to do that, you're going to start to see some common themes come up. Every one of them requires Swahili, or every one of them requires advanced data visualization, or whatever the hell. And then you have this checklist that you can hold up to graduate school programs. And maybe the Kennedy School is the most famous school you can think of, but they don't teach any of that. So why the hell would you go there? Why would you spend 2 years of your life and all that money and all that effort not building the skills that you need? But maybe Johns Hopkins SAIS, or American University's conflict resolution program, or the University of Texas at Austin, or LBJ is one of ours, the Bush School at Texas A&M is one of ours, and has, Eric, in your case, a lot of their graduates go into the intelligence community. Far fewer of their graduates go to the World Bank. So one may make sense for one of you, but one may make less sense for the other. But you need that list of things you're seeking. Sorry, Eric, go ahead.
I'm so sorry. What was the name?
The Texas A&M Bush School.
Bush School.
As in George the First, King George the First, President George the First. So again, Piper, in your case, really looking at all of those different issue areas and ranking them where your heart is, and then starting to read jobs and seeing what they need. Because when I think about I wouldn't think about the Kennedy School necessarily for that particular skill set, but I would think about SAIS. But only because this is what I do for a living. So again, that's kind of the parallel that you need. And I was not successful in being a short answer. Yeah, please let me ramble in your direction.
Okay, I just was wondering, like, the beneficials of going to law school if you don't necessarily intend to work in law, because I'm more interested in like public policy and international relations concerning like human rights and gender issues like in international communities. So I was just wondering if is it like a policy school like at Columbia or some, like, as an example, would be better than going to law school?
I think you know the answer to this question in your heart. So I say this to students all the time, and just like I said to Piper, right? Look at the curriculum. If 3 years of law school, and again, I'm making this up, if 2 3/4 years of law school is writing wills, and you don't want to do that, why would law school is a very prescriptive graduate program. Every 1L does the same thing, every 2L does the same thing, and maybe there's a little variance in the 3rd year. If you don't want to do those things, but you feel like you have to because it would make your grandma happy, or you feel like you have to because you're nervous that nobody else has gone to policy school, or that there's no jobs or some, things like that. First of all, let me debunk you of that. I can't help the grandma part, right? That's a conversation you got to have on your own. But the point of graduate programs is to master something. It's a master's degree. So if you're mastering things you don't want to use, to me, that is not an investment of time and money and effort And as much as your grandmother, I'm sure, loves you, she doesn't have to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning to write the papers, and she doesn't have to go to class. So if you want to work on all those things you talked about, human rights and gender issues and policy questions, a school that is going to deliver the professional toolkit to affect those issues makes more professional sense, is more of a professional fit than a law school. Now, I could be totally wrong, and you could look at some law schools and say, yeah, that's the professional skill set I want to build, but that's what it's got to be grounded in. And I know it's easy for me to say, because I already have a graduate degree, right? Don't be afraid, it's fine. But I think there's often a lot of pressure to go to things that people recognize, or that the other people in your life who love you and care about you are familiar and comfortable with. But I would encourage you, as the person who actually has to do this and live this life, to really drill down on those sorts of professional fit questions, because you don't have to be in DC if you want to work on policy. You don't have to go to law school if you want to work on policy. There's a million roads into at least our space. And if this is where you want to be, that's not the only door to walk through. So, if you're interested in questions like gender and human rights, the University of Minnesota actually has an amazing human rights program and a huge center on gender and policy. And that's a case, Piper, to your point, where the name of the degree may not reveal all the cool stuff going on underneath it. And if you want, you can talk to the Humphrey School on Thursday at this event that I talked about and say to them, this is what I want to do. Do your graduates go do that? Or what sorts of skills do you build towards that? And they should have answers for you about those kind of things. But it may not ever occur to you to look at the University of Minnesota until you did a little digging or talk to somebody like me who can point you in a direction like that. And you may look at it and be like, what the hell was she thinking? That was a stupid idea. But it's, it's a little bit out of your day to maybe, but I would say you do the same thing on law schools, right? There's no golden ticket. You got to do the homework and the personal discernment to figure out what kinds of things make sense. All right, Alexa, please. I haven't had a chance to learn anything about you, so give me the super quick tour.
Hi, I'm Alexa. I'm a freshman, and I'm hoping to major in international studies here, and then I'm going to apply for the Tower Center also. So my question was, for internships, like as a first year, I guess, and hopefully I want an internship in the State Department in the future. Where do you think the best place to start off is, like this summer, next summer, to hopefully get to the State Department?
Sure. So for a state internship, you should start now looking at the process, because it's going to take quite an extensive period of time to get in, get noticed, get cleared, and go. And it's also going to take time with financial planning and all those kinds of things, especially if you're taking an internship abroad compared to an internship in DC. DC is a very expensive city, but flying to Geneva is an even more, and it's not that it's out of reach, it just takes planning. The other thing to think about, and I'll make sure that you guys have this link too, is with a clearance, there's certain things you're going to need to prep now. If you've lived in different places, you're going to need to pull that information together. You're going to need to get a good handle on your financial situation. Obviously, as a freshman, you've maybe just taken on new loans and all that kind of stuff. You're going to need to think about who you would want to have a reference for you. So starting to put the pieces in place for the clearance you're going to need when you're a junior is part of it. In terms of skills and internships, if you want to stay local, I'm sure there's a World Affairs Council near you or a UN association near you. Any of those that will sort of give you exposure to muckety mucks who like to muck about, right? And that will let you, again, have some of those experiences that you can share in an internship application. State's going to look at your breadth of knowledge. They're going to look at whether you really want to be at State. There's a lot of internship applications where it doesn't actually use the words State Department or Foreign Service or Foreign Policy in the letter. And you're like, then why the hell do you want to be here? They're going to look at your language skills if you want to go abroad. So taking those sorts of classes, if that's what you want to build towards, thinking about, and they're very transparent about a lot of this on their website, the kinds of the things you need to build, but you need to start the process now because it's going to take 12 to 18 months. In case that is longer than you'd like, every July, the government has what they call an Apply in July push for the Virtual Student Federal Service. These are remote internships, so you can do them in your jammies from Dallas or wherever you are, with various federal agencies, of which the State Department is one. It's all unclassified work, so the clearance factor isn't there, but it's everything from working with doing educational promotion to recruit more, and this is a real thing, Tajik students to come study in the US. So there's your communication skills and your diplomacy skills and all that. The Forest Service is looking for people, but it's all remote. So it can be a great way to get introduced to federal service and have that on your resume to show your call to public service and all those things I talked about, but remote. But that was last July, so you need to watch for that next July. Lots of federal agencies take, yeah, go ahead, Eric.
What program did you say brings Tajik students to the US?
So most US embassies have what's called an Education USA office.
Okay.
And these are usually local nationals who work to recruit students to come and study in the US. If this kind of thing is of interest, I'm sure there's an international student and scholar office at SMU's campus where, again, you can do your work study, you could do an internship. If you would like to have that sorts of experience or build your language skills in that way, I'm sure there's stuff that's local too. There's also a lot of organizations like the Institute for International Education or Cultural Vistas or IREX, that administer a lot of these programs that also take interns. So if that sort of relationship building is of interest, there's a lot of those kind of possibilities too.
But you said these offices also facilitate travel for international students to come to the US?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, that was just side curiosity.
Yeah, it's all good. So Alexa, again, all of those things, they'll be remote. There's been a huge explosion for obvious reasons in remote internships. So while you're competing with kids from all over the country, you can do stuff now in Texas that would otherwise previously have been locked only to folks in DC or maybe somebody like Keeley who goes back and forth. So, starting to look for those kinds of pieces. I don't think you were here when I rattled off, but the State Department has lots of different cones. So thinking about, are you more interested in the economic side of things? So maybe you work for your local Chamber of Commerce or your trade promotion board, or the US Chamber of Commerce office in your town, whatever it is, if that's the kind of thing you're interested in. If it's public diplomacy, like I said, or sort of like promoting the US brand in the world, right? Maybe it is your local World Affairs Council or UN Association, Global Ties Office, all of these, and there's a kabillion of them in Texas. The Asia Society has a huge office. That one might be in Houston. But all of these different offices that are there that you can intern with locally or slightly more remotely. If it's management, working for a business, working for a trade investment or real estate agency, all of those kinds of nuts and bolts sort of things. So again, thinking about the different components and what sorts of skills you can build. And if none of that works, we can also talk about things like the short-term UN volunteer corps, that's like one-off projects. So there's lots of ways to gain that experience, but I encourage you, and it's wonderful that some of you are freshmen and sophomores, to start this process now. I'm not being short-winded at all. Keely, please let me ramble at you.
So broadly speaking, what are does having a graduate degree, is that basically like a required prereq for most of these jobs that you're talking about? Or is it more of would it be possible for me to get into kind of this stuff without a graduate degree straight from undergrad?
I hate to say it really varies, but it really varies.
Yeah.
So the Foreign
Service,
Service,
that would be your answer, but I wanted to know.
The Foreign Service, you could take the test tomorrow.
Right.
You get extra, it's a points system. So you get extra points for a grad degree, you get extra points for language skills, you get extra points if you're a Peace Corps volunteer or a veteran or all of that kind of stuff. But is it required? No. But it might be required to move up at some point in your life. For a nonprofit job, it will vary. If it's a specialized position or a position that requires a certain amount of professional skill set or mastery of something, maybe yes. So this is where that exploration part really, if you read 5 jobs and every single one of them requires a master's degree, then you know that one of 2 things is true. You either need to get it now, which I discourage all of you from going straight through, but you got to do what you got to do. I went straight through, kind of wish I hadn't. So that's why I always say take a little bit of time in between to do some of that discernment. But if you really feel closed out of absolutely everything, then or financially you have to do it, or you have to stay in school mode, or you're just never going to go back. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why it might make sense to go straight through, but if you don't have to, I encourage you not to. So it's really going to vary. Companies may have plenty of lower level jobs. But again, if you, after a couple years, you need to move to that next level, the grad degree is going to be that springboard into that future version. I usually describe it in some cases, and this is increasingly true, but not 100% true. It is your ticket to the party, right? It doesn't mean the party's any fun. It doesn't mean the food is any good. It doesn't mean you meet anybody nice. It gets you in the door. But not every door requires that particular ticket. So it all goes back to what is the professional fit and why are you doing this? So, if you choose to do it, maybe, much like grad school or law school where it's highly prescriptive, there are programs that are highly prescriptive and there are programs that are a little bit more flexible. If you choose to go straight through, maybe a more flexible program may be the right approach so that you can continue to test different things, much like an undergrad degree that's a little of this and a little of that. If you are doing more of the searching, and I would argue this is a very expensive and time consuming and intense way to do that searching, but again, I don't get to make your life decisions for you. Shit, I can barely make my own life decisions. So, again, finding one of those flexible programs that's going to let you test different things and let you master something that's pretty malleable might be a better fit than something that's really about going deeply into something, because you may get to the bottom of that well and go, oh God, I don't want to be here. So that may also influence, if you do choose to go straight through, the kind of program structurally that makes more sense. And that's, again, where I think it was Piper's question. Like, look at the core and look at the electives. And some of them maybe have a very broad core that's going to let you build a broad set of skills and a lot of different electives. Oh yeah, you want to take a class in the religion studies and the business school. Okay, great. And there's a lot of our programs that are like that. Again, instead of the depth of something, if you don't know what it is that you really want to go deeply into. And I'm clearly getting the sign that I have prattled on too long. So again, you kind of have my email, apsia@apsia.org. If you do all write to me, please just tell me how we met. I talk to a lot of students and I don't always know how I encountered all of you, but I hope this was helpful. I know it was kind of rambly, but I hope this was helpful.
No, thank you so much, Carmen. And I will definitely send everyone Carmen's email, and then anything that Carmen sends my way, I will make sure to send it your way. And again, if you have any questions for the Tower Center, I'm here on board, the Assistant Director of Programs. So, and then come back with us on the 4th where we're talking about graduate school. So I'll send another email out as well. So just everyone, thank you. And Carmen, thank you so much. So we look forward to doing more events with you.
Yeah, and like I said, tomorrow is our thing, our small group on national security and global threats. And Thursday is the big grad school fair. So there's going to be 26 schools from all over to talk. You can talk to as many of them as you want. So I encourage you all to join us then.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.